Hello everyone. Here's a little fun fact for you. That little clip right there, right at the end, was actually sung in a goodbye compilation video by one of the devs we'll be talking to today. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. We have a lot to talk about today. This is going to be a lot of fun. What is ROR? This is Return of Reckoning. We're going to be having a discussion with the devs of the private server of Warhammer Online Return to Reckoning, which is a resurrection of Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning. Can you co-stream them? Yes. So, a couple things real quick before we jump in with the devs and get started on this Q&A is that, first and foremost, there's going to be a lot to talk about, and we have worked pretty hard to kind of up the presentation and the visual assets of this stream compared to the last Q&A that we did a few months back. So I'm not going to be able to see chat, so y'all are going to have to kind of behave yourselves, and the devs will be kind of running around in the chat, so you might bump into them in Twitch chat or YouTube chat, but I myself will not be watching the chats, so don't burn the place down, try to keep the riots to a minimum. I hope you all are looking forward. We have a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop in with the devs and get started. Oh, and before we hop in, I would very much like to introduce you to our the unique place that we're hanging out for this Q&A. Welcome, guys, to Nehekara. A place no one else can get to in this wild. Alright. Can y'all hear me? Hello, hello? Uh-oh, did I get moved into AFK?
Hey there, what's going on?
Okay, no, y'all can hear me. Great.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yep.
So, welcome everyone to the live stream. Real quick, before we start getting into questions, I just want to introduce everyone we've got here with us. We've got the devs and a dev-shaped dragon in the background that's covered up by the logo, which I should probably move. And so, with us today... There we go. With us today, we've got Max Heyman. We've got Lena. I always... Remind me one more time, because I'm gonna keep forgetting until you remind me like 3 or 4 times. It's like a weird quirk I have. Just real quick, how to pronounce it. Go ahead. What is it?
Lena.
Lena. Lena? Right?
Lena. Yeah.
Okay.
Lena.
Lena. Don't be surprised if I have to ask that 2 or 3 more times. War Grimnir, back with us again. We've got Dalen and, of course, GameSpawn. Thank you all so much for being here, guys, and let's go ahead and hop into it. And if y'all want to say hello real quick before we get into the first question, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Max.
Hi, I'm Dalen.
Hey,
Max is
Lena.
the lead dev. Dalen is also a developer.
Yeah,
Liana is our database developer lead.
there we go. There's that shoulder carry.
This is War Grimner. I'm the lead GM.
Hello, and I'm GameSpawn, Communications.
A communications officer.
All right, and just a quick rundown for anyone that is a little fuzzy on their memory. This is Return of Reckoning, which is a fan-made and run Warhammer Online private server. They've been going for 7 years now, and something that's really special about this project is that they've been doing this completely free to play. There is no way to purchase anything in this game. There's not even a way to donate. It's a completely passion project from the ground up. So that's something that you really don't see nowadays in a lot of places, and it's a really humbling thing to get to see and be a part of. So real quick, before we get into it, just a quick reminder that this is a Q&A that is based from questions from y'all, the community. They were able to gather quite a few questions from the onslaught that were submitted. So big thanks to everyone that did participate. There were 283 questions gathered, and today we're going to go through 70, which is 20 more than last time. So hopefully we'll be able to get through it before the sun goes down, or up, depending on where you are in the world. We really appreciate everyone that submitted all the questions. There were, of course, a number of duplicates, so don't worry, they weren't just cutting down on all those 283, but they kind of consolidated a fair number of them. But we just wanted to let everybody know that they were looked at and appreciated, and thank you all so much for participating. So we're going to split this Q&A into two parts. The first part are going to be questions that require more detailed answers from the devs, while the second part is going to be more of a lightning round, just kind of yes or no with very brief answers. So last time we managed to get through 50 questions in about 2 hours. This time we're going to get through 70 questions, and probably in faster time because we've got a little bit more experience behind us. So let's go ahead and get started. Max, we're going to start with you, my dude, and the first question for today is, are there stats that we have available about A, the number of players for each class in the game, and B, the number of players for renown ranks?
Yeah, so I pulled this the data out earlier today, so if you switch over to the slides,
We got slides up.
Yep, and we've go to the first slide.
First slide is up.
Cool. So you can see here all the these are the by careers. So you know the most popular one seems to be the warrior priest, and the least popular one seems to be whatever is under your head.
Oh, that would be the rune priest. Here, I'll lean
The rune
over.
priest.
I'll get out of the way.
Yeah. So you can see how they are. You know, we've got. I mean, we could probably hope to flatten that line a bit more, but it's not terrible. People obviously don't like playing dwarfs as much as other classes. But yeah, these are the numbers for every character that's currently in the database for those classes. And we've got another graph on the next slide, which is the renown rank distribution. I had removed renown rank 1 because it was horribly skewed, because people like to reserve their names. So there was like, it just made the graph too small. So you can see most of the players are obviously the lower levels, and then it sort of tails off as it goes higher up the renown ranks, with some peak around the 80, 81, 82 sort of range, which is obviously a point where it gets really hard to level after that. So that's kind of like the end game levels. And yeah, so those are the numbers.
Awesome. Wonderful. Though I am going to have to put you in the Book of Grudges for that dwarf comment. Anyway, moving on to the next question. Max, can the /sit emote finally be permanent? If not, what are the obstacles between us and that goal?
So this just goes back to, if everyone remembers the special emote, which does a different thing for every sort of race. So for Empire, he has a hand puppet, for example. And we had a problem where it never ended. And a quick fix for that was to hard-code a duration in, so it reverts back after a certain amount of time. We haven't really looked into what sets the animation back. So, for example, sit animation, we could have it so when you start moving, the animation changes. We just need to figure out how to make the game do that, and it's not the top of the priority list. But yeah, it could be fixed at some point when we figure it out. Look into it.
Fair enough. Next, we're going to hop over to chat with GamesBond. So earlier this year, Warhammer Online was chosen as the best classic MMORPG that is still running from groups that voted on this particular topic. How was this achieved, and what does this translate to for you guys?
So I also prepared a screenshot of the recent or of the polls that ended on January 10. So what happened actually after a day from our nomination by Massively OP, Max actually sent me the link on Discord. And by then, when I opened it, it had Star Wars Galaxies already at 600 votes, which was really massive at the time. And I was like, are we supposed to compete with that? And Max just told me, yes, we are. So I prepared the announcement and the visual and dropped it on Discord, the forum, and all other channels we operate on. And the next thing I didn't expect at all was 330 votes from the first 10 minutes. We shared this poll with the community. And the next day it was a whole 1,000 votes without expecting anything. So at the end of the voting process, we gathered around 5,500 votes, and the closest classic game to us was at around 3,600. So it's almost 2,000 votes difference.
So if you just go to the slides, and it's the next slides after the...
Ah, gotcha. There we go.
Yeah.
So this surely translates to how loyal and resilient the community of Return of Reckoning and Warhammer Online is, and how much it supports the original game. For example, or actually, Lord of the Rings Online also has a resilient and loyal community, and they also shared and announced the link to this pool. But of course, at the end, their community couldn't keep up to ours. This specific achievement is purely credited to the Return of Reckoning community, because without their support, we wouldn't have even seen any sort of vote. And thanks to them, we reached the top of the best classic MMORPG that is still running till 2020.
Well, that is absolutely awesome. But should we really be too surprised? I mean, the Warhammer Online community does specialize in absolute PvP in any scenario, so it makes absolute sense to me that they came out on top in such a situation. But that's awesome. So congrats to the community and y'all for such an accomplishment. That's a great award to have.
Thank you.
Now let's pop over to Dalen. So we have a question here that says, can the mount horn be disabled, or the sound effect be disabled at least, as a optional setting like how the appearance / VFX toggle ones work?
Yeah, so not easily is the short answer. I mean, we're looking into making more settings optional using that settings tab that we just added. But for abilities like that, basically the server just sends the ID of the ability that's being used, and then the client will look up like animation, visual effects, and sound effect for that ability in data files that's stored on the client. So there's no easy way to just like optionally turn off one of those. So I mean, a while back we lowered the volume for them because they were pretty loud and obnoxious. So they're at least less obnoxious now. So that's a compromise.
Fair enough, fair enough. So you'll have to stick with the chorus of war horns for now, but at least the sound's been tweaked a little bit. So, over to Liana, can there be an increase in the size of stacks to increase inventory space for items?
Well, the technical limit is 65,535, so that seems a bit high to change stack size to. Well, regarding the crafting stack sizes, some of the very common add-ons used actually hard set the stack sizes, and it would very much break them if we changed anything. So these outcomes would cause more problems than they have probably, and they are perhaps worse.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, it can be changed, but doing so might unleash some pretty horrible situations. All right.
It can, but more problems, surely.
Fair enough, fair enough. War Grimnir, back over to you. Considering you run the poll for the Pug scenarios, what is your opinion on limiting this to Renown rank 70 players and below?
The keyword there is limiting. Reducing the pool of available players isn't going to improve the Pug scenario. The more you limit that pool, the less people you have that are going to play that aspect of the game. The Pug scenario is not a lobby mode scenario. It's just for people who are too lazy to form a group.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Games Bond. Our question for you is that now that the Return of Reckoning wiki is finally accessible to the player base, what are the future plans to enrich it for everyone?
So we made the Return of Reckoning wiki accessible by everyone registered on the forums, which is the perfect decision, in my opinion, that answers tons of requests that has been placed by the community over the previous months or years. As for the future, we've already started working on gathering a small but active team of editors. And even though everyone can edit the wiki without joining this team, it's simply present to cover edits that need direct contact and information from the devs. So it makes the process easier. And if anyone wishes to actively edit the wiki and help us out and help new players out, they just need to contact me, either by forum, in-game, or on Discord. And we never have deadlines or duties for editors. They edit as they please and when they feel like it.
All right, so if anyone listening out there would be interested in helping, support the community by revitalizing and really pumping a lot of love and affection into the ROR wiki, be sure to reach out to GamesPawn if through any of those systems. It'd be great to see that, just have tons of information on it. This game can be a little intimidating at first when you log on, and it does hold a lot of secrets that are not necessarily the easiest to find intuitive. But let's head to some more community-focused questions. So, sticking with you, GameSpawn, our next question is, last month we saw 2 surveys in a single week. Why were these triggered, and how were the results addressed by y'all?
Okay, so what really triggered the 2 surveys in a single week was the general maybe disappointment of players, of some players actually, regarding the appearance change and the RAM visibility. Now we really cannot satisfy everyone playing, of course, nor can any other game do it. But we noticed there's something different this time. It wasn't some players getting disappointed because of the class or a faction. It was bigger than this. So it basically affected their personal experience in the game and how they see the enemies and the allies and how they interact with them. So whether we were interested or not in Passion Hammer or roleplay, we had to respect how they personally enjoyed the game. And from this point, we did the 2 surveys, and we actually rushed them to come up with quicker answers. As for the results, the appearance survey ones were clear enough, and Max changed the appearance change from being permanent to being toggled on and off, with the default being off, so everyone can see the enemy appearances. The satisfaction always comes when you hear how welcoming the community was to this adjustment after the survey has been completed. As for the survey results, honestly they were confusing, and part of that problem is my fault for not asking straightforward questions, so this will surely be adjusted for future surveys. We're gonna ask clearer questions and get clearer answers. But in the end, the result from the RAM survey was that players want to see the RAM on the map, but under some conditions. So maybe the devs can come up with new features, which will be discussed internally, of course.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for the answer. All right, let's pop over to Max, who's been transforming occasionally back there for us. Can the character names that have not been played for years be purged to allow easier naming for new characters?
So the answer to this is yes, and we did this about 6 months ago, where we took every character that hadn't been logged into, and if their account also hadn't been logged into at all in the last 2 or 3 years, we basically changed their name to have just some characters at the end, and when they would log in, if they ever log in again, then they can they get prompted to rename their character, and they can choose the original name they had if it's still available, but it allows other players to choose those names. Now, we don't have this going on a sort of rolling basis, but we do it in sort of batches, so maybe we'll do it in a few months. We might just go, okay, every character that hasn't logged in for 3 years, their names are now available to use. But yeah, so we will probably do it in the future at some point, again, with another rolling batch.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Okay, back over to Liana. Are there any new maps that you think could be implemented for Return of Reckoning?
Well, really not easily. We can add map data that has been made for the game. So basically maps, for example, which were removed from beta, or maps from Wrath of Heroes we could use. But completely new maps are a bit trickier, and we have managed to do it, but sadly we don't have the tools yet to create really beautiful new levels.
Okay, fair enough. So there's your answer to that question, folks. Back over to Max the Dragon here. After a long wait, the community is excited for the new ranked version. Can you share with us how the current progress is going and the overall approach you have to the upcoming ranked season 2?
Yep. I'm going to pass this over to Secrets, who's actually with us, but we wasn't sure if he could be in, so he's going to jump in and answer this question.
Yeah, hello. How is everyone going today? Everyone's looking good. Anyway, Rank Season 2, this is a fun one. Basically, we are going to actually talk about this. This is exciting. What we pretty much looked about is we're making ranked with seasons, but we don't actually have the concept of seasons. In fact, the season's been in limbo. We've been looking at the 13-week cycle that Path of Exile does, and we're kind of aiming for something like that, just something where we can actually do some sort of approach that works in a time frame. Because if we don't have a time frame, we can't commit to it. We can't have players to commit to it, and that's pretty much why we're doing that. This is going to fit into major balance cycles, which we'll talk about later. Exciting stuff there, and other content updates. We're also considering restricting queue hours to peak times, mainly because there's peak engagement during those hours, and maybe longer periods on the weekends when our concurrent users are quite at peak, to focus people into queuing at certain time slots and to increase pops during those times, because right now it's kind of all over the place. We've also been discussing group ranked and have a few designs for having scenario teams. We also have some new capes, which Max is working on right now with a bunch of lovely content people, which will be an exclusive ranked reward, and they look awesome. Think of the whole system we're setting up for group rank to be something like arena teams from early World of Warcraft. It's a situation that would actually apply best here, especially with the 6v6 community.
Awesome. That sounds very exciting. I'm sure a ton of people are really looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. Great. Thank you very much for the answer.
No, bro.
All right. Over to Dalen here for our next question. For new players, first impressions sometimes are enough to judge the entire game. Would the devs consider having a reverse booster for Tier 2 zones? So bringing players down to a max level of, say, 25, so that lower-leveled players feel less overwhelmed when entering this new environment?
Yeah, so, I get where this is coming from, but the current implementation, at least of the default string, isn't really that balanced. It's currently basically only used in the low-level dungeons, the sewers and SSLM dungeons. And I mean, it works kind of, but it's not super balanced. So I don't really think this would actually help that much. Yeah, but we have in the past discussed like maybe making the tier 2 zones into like level 16 to 39, kind of like in the scenario brackets, but we don't really have any immediate plans to change that.
All right, appreciate the answer. And our last question for this section before we'll be moving on is for game spawned. So let's go ahead and just knock this out, as this is the last question for this particular segment. Is there any double experience events coming soon on the horizon that people could look forward to?
So as a short answer, no, there won't be. No, there won't be like an event coming anytime soon. Because as much as people like the ×2 event, it also isn't the healthiest one for the community in the long run. Because like it really helps in leveling alts and new players, but as much as some players like to see big experienced and renowned numbers, it's also disliked by others. Because leveling up faster, or actually way faster than the gear progression, will end up in having hundreds of characters fighting with extremely low gear and falling behind others.
All right, appreciate the answer on that. So that's it for community stuff, at least for right now. So let's go ahead and head on to the next section of questions. So we're now hopping into game balance, which I know, of course, is a hot topic. So Dalen, let's start with you. Are y'all, the devs, satisfied with the amount of royals that get dropped outside of cities?
Yeah, I mean, overall we are, I would say. I mean, the city sieges is meant to be the primary way to get the sovereign sets. Maybe we will do some smaller tweaks on it, but I mean, it will still be that the majority of royal crests will be from city sieges, just at the end of the campaign. So that's
all right, great
goal with the campaign.
So if you're looking for royals, people, make sure you're heading into those cities. War Grimnir, you are our next question. Why do melee Squig herders have 10 core abilities in their tree, while the other classes have 5 or 6 abilities affected by mastery points? What's up with that?
Oh boy. So now we're going to talk about some real balance stuff, and I want to get the bingo cards ready. This is where it starts to get good, right? So melee Squig herders, this is a bit of legacy, a bit of functionality. Considering the melee form locks out all of your range skills, it was considered acceptable they would have more melee skills available. Some of the melee skills are also for the goblin form outside of Squig armor and essentially unused. Most people don't use the melee skills when they're running around with a bow trying to shoot people. Leaving them in doesn't really imbalance anything, and it keeps people who would otherwise complain about these skills being removed from having a sad day.
All right, fair enough. Let's pop over to Max real quick. So something that I and many people in the community have heard about is that there's a brand new balance system being launched. Can you talk to us about the details and the procedure of this new upcoming system?
Yeah. So I'm going to let Wargrimner just go through it because he's just written all the notes out for it, just for this talk.
Oh yeah, I get to do this one too. So this is something that we've had in development for a while. So if you're interested in balance, people that are listening, this is a thing to listen to. Is the important part. We've been picking at a handful of different methods over the past few weeks to bring in focused community engagement and really share that burden of balance with us. The amount of dev time that we've been spending simply discussing changes was really eating into the rest of the work that the team wanted to do, and the results tended to be pushed through week to week, which led to more buggy outcomes than what we were actually comfortable with. To resolve this, we're bringing in a focus group of community members to get through most of the debate and discussion phases for the items that we're looking to resolve. We're calling these people Realm Champions for each cycle, and they will drive most of the discussion around any upcoming changes that the balance team members, the development side of it, will implement. So when it comes to testing, we've largely pushed week to week because the dev server and live server are very much connected together. The dev server is more like a staging server where any changes made are pushed live during each patch. This made it difficult to test on longer timescales, and more things leaked through to live in the form of bugs. It caused a lot of headaches and lost weekends and hot fixes instead of doing proper content development. To resolve this part, we're also having a new server specifically built for testing ability setup to push these changes to on the back end more freely without getting tied into live server development arcs. Our existing testers will be able to look at what was proposed by the Realm Champions, look at what we have developed, and have much more time to schedule proper testing sessions to better patch up any issues. So, this leads to the question of where are we getting all this time from? Secrets alluded to this. For a couple reasons, we're planning on developing around the time frame of ranked scenario seasons. Partially, this is to prevent balance changes during the ranked season cycles, which allows players to have established metas for each season. This will also allow devs more time to work on other content at predictable intervals, only needing to dedicate a couple weeks at a time of being perpetually involved in balance specifically. This should give us a 13-week window to work with for each balance cycle. So, I'm going to go over the weeks, just so everybody knows what we kind of expect from our balance team and for the Realm Champions. And this is going to be the first time the Realm Champions here too, I think. The first week of each ranked season cycle, and we start doing balance. The existing balance team is going to determine the priority changes for the next cycle. This is going to be a list of items that we want them to discuss. I'll get to one in a second. We also go through and pick new Realm Champions to introduce to the closed forum. So we want to have different people sort of filtering in and out of these Realm Champion cycles based on their experience with the classes that we want to have changes applied to. Weeks 2 through 4. We're going to present the classes and issues to the closed balance forum. The Realm Champions will debate and develop potential solutions to these presented issues. The Realm Champs are encouraged to discuss among outside peers for this phase, so they can come and talk to other people in the community, and we want them to do that during weeks 2 through 4.
Okay.
Week 5 and 6 is when we lock down and have an NDA for the Realm Champs. We're going to go through the first draft of proposals for the Realm Champs among the balance team devs, and we're going to go back and forth with those to make sure that the things that they think should be implemented versus the things that we know can be implemented can be decided on. So we're going to have 2 weeks of discussion then. Week 7, we're going to send them our drafted patch notes. They're going to do a quick review. Any questions or changes are going to be noted. We'll get final input for development. Week 8 is when the balance team will be able to actually go through and do development, actually implementing the abilities and putting them on the new test server. Weeks 9 and 10, we're going to have class reps. They're going to be invited to organize their groups, get on the test server, make sure all of these changes actually happen the way they're supposed to for each of the classes that are involved. They're going to provide implementation and feedback. They're going to identify bugs, and you timed out, and you're logged off of the game.
I did. I noticed.
You did.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, continue.
I went
You're
too
fine.
long. I'll take a drink.
I need to make sure to hit the W button.
Almost
every
done.
once in a while.
It's almost over. Yeah, just move a little bit. So we're going to provide implementation, feedback, bugs. We're going to tweak the values on whatever changes. If we need to make any minor changes for animations not working or anything else, you got to move your camera around too. We're just staring at butts now. It's not a bad view. Okay. All right. The remaining weeks, 11 through 13, are just going to be flex time for any overage that we have. If any of the weeks go long or if we need extra time, we're going to have 3 weeks of extra time in there. But we are aiming for by week 11, 3 weeks before this season ends, that we'll have enough time to lock everything down and prep long form patch notes. So in between each rank season, we're going to have a little bit of downtime, not the months of downtime that we've had, just a little bit, so that people will be able to see the changes that come out. They'll be able to adapt to them, update their teams, get back into ranked a couple weeks later, and do the next season right away.
Okay, great. And if anybody out there is panicking because they didn't commit all that to memory, just a heads up, this will be available as a VOD for all time on the YouTube channel, and it'll be on Twitch for a while. But on YouTube, it'll always be there, so you don't need to worry about committing all that. All right. Next, we're popping back over to... Well, no, we're staying with War Grimnir for a little bit.
I got 2 more, I think.
Yeah, so our next question for you is, how do you address the specs that barely anybody uses? Is there a plan to make these more viable? What's your ideas with how to handle these more rarely used specs for various classes?
So the reality is the vast majority of specs are viable. Not all specs are optimal, right? So not every spec is going to be the best for every situation. I think we've said this before. The skilled players in the community will always find the most optimal meta that invalidates other ways to play in those specific instances. It doesn't mean that they're not viable. Changing established meta comes with a lot of pain and outcry from people that are deeply invested in those metas. So it actually is difficult to change an unused quote unquote spec into a used spec, because you have to change the currently used spec into an unused one, right? Each class has 3 of them, more or less. And trying to shift people out of that to make the meta change is what causes a lot of frustration. When we do, it's intentional. And it takes a lot of time, and we go through a lot of stress for it.
All right, fair answer. And then our last question for you before we're going to be moving on from game balance, at least for a little while, is can you share with us how the balance team does approach class reworks when those come about?
Sure. You should have a slide for this with the squig on it.
Oh, I love slides.
I like this one. Oh, this is also the question where I'm supposed to answer that we watch cinematic videos and just take notes, I believe.
Okay.
So previously, before the Realm Champion system, this is kind of what you would look at for how we do balance. You come up with a whole bunch of ideas, you throw it onto a board, and you talk through it all. So we would conceptualize changes for several weeks. We would debate until we reached a consensus among the balance team devs. We would work through any implementation challenges. And then we would have a release, and then we would do minor changes. Then we would work on bugs, and we would evaluate if these changes are working as intended. And then eventually we get down to, reading user feedback several weeks after release, once they've calmed down with the initial reactionary flames that we've come to expect from them. We love you guys. The upcoming balance system will alleviate a lot of this conceptualization phase where devs spend weeks or months talking about things and be able to give these community members a chance to build stuff like this and then present it to us for us to yell at them.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Okay. I'm going to wiggle myself a little bit just to be extra safe between sections. All right. So now we're going to move into talking more about questions the community have about things that maybe could happen in the future. Talk about things that are possibilities, so to speak. So, Liana, first question for you is, are there any plans to add new crafting professions? Something like, say, blacksmithing or enchanting that would allow players to improve their armor and weapons?
So, well, for this one, you have a slide, if I am not wrong.
Okie dokie. I do. Look at that.
So, well, Mythic had an in development blacksmithing system, partially finished, and some of which made its way into the final release of the game. We spent some time fixing it up into a state in which we can do something with it. So if anyone has suggestions for a mechanic based on this UI, we would love to hear it.
Okay, so if you're listening out there, that looks like it could be really fun. I would love more things to mess around with like this. So get on it, people. But our next question, oh wow, man, that's exciting. Our next question for you is from the community. They ask, would it be possible to move the training dummies or training NPCs that are in the cities to where the class trainers are?
Technically, yes. But in my opinion, further, it makes more sense to have it where it is currently instead of inside the Temple of Sigmar. Moreover, they are placed near the equipment vendors, which also makes sense.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, and real quick before we move on, I guess I should ask if people do have ideas or thoughts of what to do with the blacksmithing UI, where would be the best place for them to go and submit those ideas?
So we will open a forum thread after the Q&A with sort of pictures of how it looks and where people can reply to. So
great.
Look out for that.
So there you go, folks. All right, Dalen, would the team ever consider having a way for level 16 to 39 players participate in the special City Siege instances?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure if there is enough players online in that bracket during the City Sieges to actually form like proper 24 versus 24 City Siege instances. I guess a lot of, or most players would log on to their level 40 characters and log into them, do the regular City Sieges. So, but there are those special scenarios like the Undercroft and the Border Quarters scenarios that open up during City Sieges. And currently we have like a very rough implementation of those. Basically, the original ones back on live used like a combination of almost every possible scenario mechanic all stuffed into the same scenario. It was a little bit confusing and weird. Our current implementation just has a couple of flags, which is not that great. But we might do something with those and make them a bit better than they currently are and have some special rewards in them. Then level 16 to 39 players could probably do them during the City Sieges.
Okay, great. Well, that would be pretty fun. All right, over to Mr. Max. So, the community was wondering, could there be some kind of realm-wide advantage or buff for if Order or Destro wins the City Siege in general? Or perhaps having some kind of debuff if you are the loser or a disadvantage? What are y'all's thoughts on that?
So, giving a buff to the winning side doesn't always work. You know, if the one team's beating you and you buff them, it's not always the most convenient. But that being said, we do have plans to sort of make the end result of a City Siege have more impact on the game. So when we first sort of started speaking about when we were implementing City Sieges a few years ago, we spoke of, you know, which mechanic are we going to implement? Will it be the more PvE mechanic, of which the game originally had when it launched, or the RVR version, which came in the 1.3 something patch? And we kind of wanted to do a bit of both. We wanted to bring the City Siege mechanic in with the RVR sort of to capture the city, and then have a second sort of stage where that city belongs to you now for a while. And, you know, Destruction, for example, own Altdorf, and there'll be a certain point where they can do activities in Altdorf which wouldn't be available, kind of like how they used to be. And then, you know, Order can go in and try and take it back if they want to. And we're still kind of looking for that at some point to expand City Sieges. We don't want, you know, the main siege mechanic to be the end-all, well, in terms of how the overall world is, because at the moment everything just resets and you can go back to your city within, you know, a few minutes, and it's not that quite exciting, not that impactful. So we are looking on making, you know, City Siege victories matter that's soon. So
Okay, great. Ah, I love that answer. I loved the early PvE city stuff. I never did get to punch Zarnik in the face, but I would love to one day in that legend. I think you could still find a 380 pixel or 280 pixel fight against him on YouTube from back in the day. Anyway,
Yeah,
moving on to the next question. Going to Dalen. Is there any hope of getting the Sentinel ring vendor for having him available to use PvP currency instead of being forced, for players who do not wish to do PvE, being forced to do PvE in order to get those items?
Yeah, so I mean, this one we have already done, basically. I mean, you can, nowadays you can buy them for triumphant emblems, which you get from ranked scenarios, ranked solo and ranked group scenarios. So I mean, that is a PvP currency. Costs around 200 of them to buy the talisman for a week. We're not planning on making it purchasable for other PvP currencies, or at least we don't currently have any plans for that.
Okay, so there you go. Technically, it's already there. So get to work on those ranked scenarios if you want access to that, dudes. And you don't want to do any PvE. Dalen, we got another question for you here. Will more advanced guild banner abilities see the light of day anytime soon?
Probably not anytime soon. We don't have any immediate plans for it, so I don't know exactly what those would be. As far as I know, we've implemented the ones that they had on live. Yeah, no, so we haven't really discussed adding any more of them.
Okay, fair enough. So, not any super advanced flag waving coming around, but you can still wave your flags, folks. Max Heyman. Can there be a new queue system for dungeons? Kind of like how a group finder system, which creates a 2-2-2 group, so presumably 2 tank, 2 TBS, 2 healer, for the chosen dungeons that the players are looking to complete.
So while it's technically possible, we could, build UI elements to do this kind of thing. It's quite a controversial feature in other games. A lot of people don't like it. Some people like it. And I think with Warhammer Online, it's community kind of matters even more. Your guild, your friends, the realm, so working together kind of thing. And the game already has an open party system, which allows you to open a group for a dungeon. You can open a group, put a note, set it as dungeons, and then people can open the party window, open the open party window, and see it and join if they want to. It's not as automated as the ones in other games, but I feel this sort of has a sort of balance between the two systems, a good middle ground. But yeah, one thing we could do is sort of make the party note more visible. So I can currently have to put your mouse over it to see it. But if you could type your note there and say, looking to do Gunbad or something, then it'd be more obvious for people to see. So yeah, no, we're not looking to do something to the extent of a dungeon finder.
Okay, so maybe a small tweak in the foreseeable future, but nothing crazy. All right, back to Dalen for our next question. So this is going to be, well, we'll go over that in a second. Can there be a city queue disconnect protection system so that players don't lose their spots and ruin their warband's city sieges should they have a disconnect issue?
Yeah, we could probably add that. Lately, we've been messing around a little bit with the scenario and city queue system. That code would need some rewriting, really, and it's currently kind of tricky code, honestly. So it might need some changes. Then there's also some question marks, should it just pause you? If you're a 24-man warband and one of the members disconnects, how should it behave? Should it pause you until that specific member is back, or until some other member is back? And what about if you wanna just continue queuing with 23 members? There's some unanswered questions there, really, but we could probably implement that.
Okay, so something being looked into, but still kind of in the early formulating stages of what that would look like right now. That's great, great. And then I believe our last question in this segment, is for Mr. Games Bond. Is there any chances that a Nordland event similar to last year's will be done again in the future or maybe soon?
Yes, there will be. We are actually planning to do the Return to Ekrond, Stronghold Saga live event from the last year the game was up on Mythic servers. This event will have a reverse bolster to allow higher level players to play in tier 1 areas.
Oh, that sounds fun. Okay, great. Alright, so that was the end of the easy questions. So everyone's going to kind of need to buckle up and make sure that your salt is properly secured, because we're going to head into some more passionate questions. So, first up, we're starting with you, Max. First question number 1 is, will the team remain focused on its own vision of the game? And if so, will y'all continue leading the project through a path that's only known to the staff working on the game?
Yes, and I mean, I would think it was great if we could have a concrete list of everything that's going to be released with exact dates, but we really, just can't do that just because of the limitation. There's 2 reasons. First of all, we're working on something we need to get we need to get things into a state where we can do an announcement and sort of promote it beforehand, and that depends on a lot of people's time. And on the other hand, we don't want to promise a load of things. Most of the things on our roadmap internally are just sort of ideas until someone starts working on it and it becomes more concrete. So the roadmap is kind of more like a nice to have list. There's always things in sort of new content that people really don't want to do. So it's trying to motivate people to do the sort of the nitty gritty bits to get them over the sort of last points. So we don't release it, but we're trying to get stuff as ready. When it's ready, we will do an announcement. Because we don't want to take too much people's time out of their lives to commit to a game that they don't get paid for.
I think that's a very reasonable response, at least personally. War Grimnir, over to you, my dude. So on live, the core tactics system were split 14 per class, right? They had 3 racial tactics, 4 archetype, and 7 class specific. Whereas in Return of Reckoning, the number of tactics ranges from 11 if you're playing a Knight of the Blazing Sun, all the way up to 18 if you're playing a Witch Elf. Knowing that, what is the balance team's approach to balance exactly? In other words, the community, a lot of people presumably have a very different idea in their head of what the word balance means. So what is y'all's version of balance?
I see. So it's not a math question. This is a question about balance. Our focus on balance is more the traditional kind, where we look at how each class performs, and then we make adjustments. Generally, we'll look at a pair of classes at the same time, as the classes are lightly mirrored. A Chosen and a Knight of the Blazing Sun are similar to each other. They do some similar things. But we try to avoid mirroring directly when introducing changes. And we also look for ways to unmirror classes, giving each class a different take on shared common functions when we can. There's not a lot of instances where we would compare a Knight to a Witch Elf, for example, as they serve significantly different functions and roles in a PvP environment. If you're questioning, sorry, not you, this is not you asking the question. If this question is asking whether or not the team is able to tell the difference between numbers like 11 and 18, I'll have you know, I don't take my socks off to count to 20.
Awesome, great. Max, back over to you for our third question here. So we've seen a couple folks over the years leave the dev team, but we very rarely hear about new people that have been coming on. Are there any words from y'all about how things are going right now? How things are internally? Are y'all staying motivated? How are things going about, getting new people to come in, having fresh ideas, fresh blood, and making sure y'all don't burn out or run into issues where you just get stonewalled and just can't find a way around it?
Well, I mean, you see people leave the team over the years. They have their real life come into it. They get a new job. They have kids, get married, those kind of things. And they post because they made a sort of connection with the community, and people will think they're gone if they just disappear, which I mean they are going. But when we have new people join, we don't automatically throw them in at the deep end with a sort of public role on Discord and on the forums and things, because not everyone is sort of likes that. We give them sort of small tasks to see if they kind of fit with the team before joining the public side. If they want to, because there's a lot of extra community interaction which goes along with that, which some people just don't have time for. You get random people messaging you quite a lot, and I mean, I personally like to keep my private messages on Discord open, which I get a lot of people messaging me, so if I ever ignore you, please forgive me. It's always, I'm okay with the bumps now and again. I don't find it that rude. But, especially like programmers, they're not really the most social people dealing with people. And we've had a lot of drama in the team with people in the community. So we want to make sure people are really sort of comfortable before they are willing to take on that sort of public-facing role if they want to. So, I mean, we're open to recruiting people all the time. We kind of usually find a task that we want to do, and then if we're all busy, we kind of look on the forums on the applications and look through everyone's applications and see, this person sort of matches what we want to do. Let's message them and see what they're interested in doing. But the best people kind of have jobs and they don't have a lot of free time. So we have a few people that aren't publicly on the team, especially artists. But yeah, that's the sort of reason why.
Okay, great. And I know I can speak from personal experience that I don't blame those people in the slightest. There's nothing better than waking up at 3 a.m. and seeing that some random guy you don't know has sent you 30 messages on Discord about, he just is really passionate, which is great, but come on, man. Give me a break.
Yeah.
All right, so back over to War Grimnir here. So, oh boy, here's a fun question. So, why do some updates focus on bringing back what was in the original live game, while other updates instead are curtailed to y'all's vision for the game?
I do like the fun questions. So this comes down to privilege. There might be 100 different opinions about which state of the game or which version of a feature was best from the live server. But we, the dev team, end up implementing these things. So those decisions ultimately are ours. If we don't have any particular vision of an issue moving forward on something, the live state of the game is fine as a fallback default. And that's why we fall back to those defaults. Generally, live states are easier to implement in the first place, as the client is already prepared to receive that data.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people sort of think that we're changing things back to live when we're really just fixing something to make it how it was meant to be on live, or we're fixing something not knowing that it was meant to have been changed down the line by us, just getting things working again. So it's not exactly clear cut as you might think.
Okay, great. Thanks for the answers, guys. Okay, so let's kind of steer away from those and hop back to talking about some more potential future things and hang out with Liana for a minute. So I got a trio of questions for you. And the first one is there any planned rework for some of the professions, some of the crafting things, especially when it comes to, say, butchering and cultivating?
Well, the existing professions may be rewritten in code. We must confess that the current system is very old by our standards. New crafting professions would be difficult to implement, but not impossible. Perhaps sometime in the future, but no immediate plans.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And our second question for you is, there have been some reports among the community of abilities or usable items causing frame drops. Is there any truth to this?
Well, basically, the more things happening on your screen are most likely to reduce your frame rate. Crashing should be rare, and for now we have no evidence to believe that this is caused with intent, and the server does not struggle with this nearly as badly as the client does.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. And then the last one I have you, at least for this particular segment, is, are there any plans to make the entirety of the maps here in Return of Reckoning more attractive to explorers? So putting out little unique unlocks or Easter eggs or treasures for people that just kind of like to wander and just explore what's available in the game.
Very much so, yes. We are aware that currently most of the players who do quests, PQs, and explore the whole world are the ones who really like the lore and are really interested in it. Making the PvE more attractive with more and better rewards, for instance, is one of my goals, even if for now the first step is to make it working fully, and trust me, this is a huge first step.
Awesome. That's probably my most that's probably the answer I'm the most excited about so far. That's great. I love doing that kind of stuff. it's a great game to just wander around. I love doing it, so I'm super pleased to hear that there's going to be more stuff with that going forward. All right, so let's kind of circle back around to some community questions and hit up Games Bond first. Will there be more surveys, either in the new or late future, that are meant to address player concerns when they matter the most?
So, in my opinion, surveys are a vital part of every community, and most of the time they reflect the opinions of the players directly. Whereas the forums often reflect the opinions of the forum users, which are most of the times a minority. I can guarantee that there will be more surveys in the future. We actually started 2021 with 2 surveys straight away, and we'll surely do more when necessary. However, the community needs to understand that surveys will only cover topics that aren't restricted to a class or a faction, but to the whole community as a general. So when it mostly affects everyone rather than specific niche of players.
Okay, great. Next question for you is, aside from the English-speaking community, other languages and their communities are pretty large in Return of Reckoning. How do y'all make sure that all the languages are being taken care of, whether it is announcements, translations, forum sections, or text and data in-game?
We actually really cater for the different language communities. But as you know, for the game itself, it's part of the toughest challenges, since aside from having someone able to translate to the specific languages, they also must have the time to actively do it and to translate hundreds of files. We have a Crowdin page, which is a page that shows the languages available and their progress, and players or community members who are willing to help or translate game files can go there. We can also share the link. As for the announcement and patch notes, we're working on adding a new group of language forum moderators to update this group, and these would translate patches to the respective communities. So again, if someone is interested in translating patch notes and major announcement for their countrymen, please feel free to contact me in-game on the forums or on Discord. It's surely easier than translating the actual game files, but these two are different.
And this is something that's really quite sad, that when Mythic shut down the sort of German servers, the Russian servers, the French servers, all the quest data that was translated, all the items was all just lost. So the Crowdin's really aimed for us to sort of build that bit data back with the community effort.
Sounds like EA. Jeez. All right. Here's a question I imagine is going to be very popular. Max, how do y'all address faction imbalance and cross-realming? Are there plans to change how these particular issues are perceived by the community?
So, I mean, we don't really want to negatively affect people too much when it comes to this. I mean, we have the lockout system that applies for the first 90 minutes you're online after you enter RVR and sort of switch realms. And we provide an XP renown rank boost for switching to the underpopulated realm. We've had a few iterations of the X realm lockout. Right now, I think we have a good balance preventing people switching realms and not erroneously locking people out like we've had in the past. I mean, I personally want to increase the lockout timer at some point. I mean, if we were, for example, open a new server, then yes, we would extend it. But that's not something we're looking at doing in the immediate future. Mythic also had a sort of 20% experience and renown boost for the underpopulated realm, which we're looking into, and to kind of boost, sort of drag new players over to the side that's kind of struggling, to sort of increase those numbers. We've even sort of spoken about trying to do it for, you know, maybe we need more tanks on order, for example. That new order tank players will get an experience and renown boost to sort of encourage players to go to that route, or if they're thinking of playing that class at some point, they might be like, I'll do that now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Mr. Gainsbond, back over to you real quick. I like this question. So how much do... How do I tactfully say this? How much do very loud forum posts impact decisions or plans that y'all are working on?
So I know the community doesn't favor this answer, but loud posts discussing inaccurate and weird approaches do not really have any impact. The devs, of course, aren't forced to abide by posts with the most views or replies, for example. But on the opposite, a thread that has a good content and a good approach that takes into consideration multiple perspectives and points of views, with barely 2 replies or barely some views, can be taken into consideration and be implemented on the next day. And this actually happened with some suggestions. Now, have there been some great threads that have had their content ignored? Of course not, because we read and monitor everything. Have there been threads in which their content wasn't implemented? For sure. And there's a huge difference between a suggestion that is ignored and a suggestion that isn't implemented. And that's normal because opinions will always differ, and what's important is to keep the respect between the players and the team, even if your personal request wasn't taken into consideration, because there's always another opinion and there's always the other player who your suggestion might affect as well.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And then, Dalen, our last community question, I believe, at least for a bit, is the community has issues with the current City Siege system. Do y'all have any plans to make city content more suitable for in-game, especially in terms of quality of instances and accessibility for players?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something we would definitely like to do. We have done some tweaks to the city queue systems, but it's still by no means perfect. Definitely not. But we also haven't really had time yet to fix it. But we have discussed doing some sort of matchmaking to promote more like quality fights more often in the city sieges. I mean, that would be some sort of like best effort matchmaking. We would still respect like queue times and so on. And sure, like when there's a city siege in the middle of the night and there's only like 5 instances, I mean, even if you do matchmaking, it might not be like perfectly balanced matches, but during prime time and so on, we could hopefully get more like balanced fights in most of the instances at least. So yeah,
Okay.
We would like to, but we haven't gotten around to it yet, basically.
Well, I appreciate the answer. All right, we're heading back over to game balance. So we're going to start with Dalen. What are the reasons that y'all have for implementing the RAM visibility on the map for everyone? And are there plans to further develop this feature going forwards?
Yeah, so the motivation for it was to bring more fighting into the RVR lake, and not just like around the keep sieges, because as fun as keep sieges are, it gets tedious. I mean, most of them are kind of the same. So the motivation was to bring more fighting out into other parts of the RVR lake, and a bit more like, danger in taking the ram to the enemy keep and so on.
Clockwork course.
So you can get ambushed more easily by the enemy. As GameSpawn talked about earlier, there was a survey around this change, and the results of that was somewhat like inconclusive, really. We might do something with like guild keep upgrades, for example, and that they might interact with this system somehow, but we haven't really decided on exactly what they're.
Okay, great. So a active and interesting future ahead for these changes, but not exactly sure where that road's going just yet. All right, next up, War Grimnir, we've got some questions for you. And our next one is, what is your opinion on the fact that Order has only one cooldown reduction ability, while Destruction has two that apparently are relatively easier to use?
So the Black Orc variant, I find to be ill-advised and effectively reinforced an already dominant spec. I argued against it when it was introduced. I didn't think it was necessary at the time. I don't think it's necessary now. But this isn't something that I've strongly debated on, as it's one of my less familiar classes. I don't have a Black Orc. I don't play a Black Orc. I don't like the stance swapping that they do. These classes are broadly slated for the Realm Champion group to address and suggest necessary changes. And if they determine any issues and have some resolutions, we may see a change by the end of the next rank cycle.
Okay, great. Our next question, which I believe we touched, it was kind of like a distant future thing in the last Q&A, which is for War Grimnir once more, is when is the rework for the Choppas and Slayers slated?
So this hasn't been a particularly high priority, with several other classes that we want to address first. The Choppa and Slayer functionality works rather well with their intended roles and their mechanics. Their mechanics are implemented without any glaring flaws. Regarding more passionate comments on Rampage and Get to the Choppa, we don't share the same enthusiasm to remove or change them. Secrets has something to say about it, though. You can jump in here, buddy.
Well, I've actually do have something to say. Basically, I still think the two entries for Slayer and Choppa needs a rework. The previously mentioned, and actually I'm hearing myself on Zarvix's stream. Oops. And as I previously mentioned, it's not a high priority. And with the introduction of the Realm Champions, I think they'll get around to it in good time. Sorry, not chime. That's a bank. For stuff like Rampage and Get to the Chopper, I refer to the Realm Champion team, but also I think this Rampage and Get to the Chopper are pretty iconic skills that define each class. Again, though, any mechanical changes at this point, we want to heavily rely on the Realm Champion team to discuss and debate.
Great, thanks for the answer. I'm really looking forward to seeing this Realm Champion system implemented. It seems like it's going to hopefully produce a lot of useful data for you guys and help the community really get some great interaction with future changes going forward. And then our last question in this segment, once more for War Grimnir, is do y'all have any idea, or can you share with us, what careers are next on the rework cycle? And can you share with us some ideas and approaches y'all may have stewing about what you're going to be doing with their rework?
I mean, we're an hour and 15 minutes in already. I could go over them entirely. The next classes we want to focus on from a mechanical perspective. The mechanics of the class are Archmage and Shaman. Their mechanic is lightly introduced. It has some features of it that were the same on Live. Live went through a couple of different iterations. It is not the final iteration that we want to have currently. The Knight and Chosen classes. We want to find a way that Knight and Chosen become a little bit more interactive with their mechanic. Their mechanic is entirely their auras, and currently all you do is you turn them on and you have a good time. If there's ways that we can make them more interactive, that's something we want to focus on. We're also interested in some lighter touches on Swordmaster and Black Orc, White Lion and Squig, and Witch Elf and Witch Hunter. Perhaps not in this balance cycle, but there will be discussions that come up for it.
Okay, great. So nearest immediate future, Shaman Archmage, Chosen Knight of the Blazing Sun, medium, and then we've got some distant futures down the road.
Yeah, and not buffs. I mean, we're not saying everybody's getting buffed. We're saying these are classes that we're going to take a look at, dig into how these classes work, and see how we want to change those.
Okay, great.
So people, yeah.
Thank you very much, my man. And, okay, let's talk about some really exciting last kind of little things, and then we're going to be hitting into Rapid Fire City. So, Max, here's a question I know I'm heavily invested in. We have talked about some of the missing dungeons in the past, the Hunter's Vale and the Lost Vale. Can you give us any updates on, do we have Hunter's Vale coming up anytime in the near future? Can you give us like an idea of any dates or ideas? And what about the Lost Vale? What's the info on that famous little dungeon?
Hello? Yep, sorry. So it will be announced officially soon. Almost all the boss scripting is complete. A lot of the superficial stuff, like the stag that introduces you when you go in, the runestone puzzle, the eagle carriers, they're all done. And we're mainly working on bug fixing and balancing. I think last week we did a sort of test run with a load of testers, sort of mark this boss has way too much health. This bugs out if 10 people go into the area, and it spawns 10,000 sort of dogs running at you instead of just the 3.
No, you should leave that in.
Yeah, well, after they just kept spawning, and then after a while, the server doesn't like 10,000 dogs. But those things are sort of fixing. So we're just fixing bugs and balancing. Right now, I'm sort of rewriting how the dungeon instance system works to be a bit more robust, to fix sort of persistent issues, where the server restarts and you can't complete a dungeon because the door's no longer open. And just make it a bit faster to work with future dungeons, support different versions of dungeons for sort of the tier scaling in Hunter's Vale at some point, and just sort of the upcoming features that, you know, Tomb of the Vulture Lord will need, and things like that. I have some slides, but you might have to take off the name overlay you've got on your thing, because that's where the images are.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
So excited for this.
So these are just some pictures. So that we've got all this scripted. You know, the introduction stag that transforms and does speeches towards you, and there's more pictures if you go through. Yep. So we've got the treekin twins. They're scripted. We're just balancing those. Maybe adding a few more mechanics to make them a bit more interesting. And the tree that falls down after you sort of kill this boss is all working. We've got all the stages of the wolf, lion, and dogs sort of mini bosses sort of going. The ever popular runestone puzzle, and the final boss is just the mechanics are quite complicated, and we just need to. There's some bugs that once the bug triggers, it kind of breaks the whole thing. So we just need to sort of find out what's causing those. So we soon, and then Lost Vale will come sort of after that. We may spend some time doing some other things, but I've sort of taken on sort of the Hunter's Vale scripting at the moment, just because the other people who are working on it have other commitments in life, and I'm just I'm trying to make it better because I don't like the dungeon system at the moment.
Awesome, great. I am so very excited for, man, just looking at those images, that was hardcore nostalgia. I'm really looking forward to going through there again. Did I time out again? Yes, of course I did. So thank you very much for the answer on that. I'm super excited to get another dungeon to mess around with. Dalen, you are our next question. Can you confirm or deny that healers get the least contribution due to them not causing damage or not taking damage as much as other roles?
Yeah, so with the contribution systems, there's actually like several different contribution systems for PQs, like regular PV PQs, for the Open RVR campaign, for the fortresses, and the newly introduced one for city sieges. So I don't know, maybe this question is about the new contribution system for in city sieges. And I mean, that one has like different weights for different types of contribution, and we try to keep it fairly balanced. So, I mean, healers are only doing healing, maybe some protection, but still mostly healing. But that has like a higher weight in the contribution. So, I mean, I've monitored it a bit, and over the last couple of city sieges I've done, the top 6 contributors have been 2 healers, 2 tanks, 2 DPS. and I mean those are the ones that get like a gold medal on their contribution. Then after the contribution, there's like a random roll, so your final total score might still not be in the top 6, even if you had top 6 contribution. So I mean, you need to keep track of both that. But overall, it seems fairly balanced. We might take a closer look on like more data on it and do some minor tweaks, but
Okay, great.
overall, it works.
So your feedback and concerns, folks, is being taken into account. They're looking into it, and wonderful. And then our last question before we're heading into rapid fire is for Max, which is: will there be any new scenarios?
So yeah, there are a number of scenarios which were removed from the beta or added in Wrath of Heroes, and we're looking ideas for mechanics for these. In regards to the Wrath of Heroes ones, we need to make them lore-friendly to implement them, as Wrath of Heroes was 3v3v3, well, 6v6v6, an arena game. So I've got some slides just to show people the sort of ones we've dug out from versions of the game or Wrath of Heroes, and some of them we can tell were removed because they have the layout just doesn't really make sense. So this one's Cadron Valley Pass, and I've got some screenshots. You might have to remove your overlays on the image.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can see different shots of these. We're going to post these up on the forums, and so people can sort of see them and sort of work out mechanic. I think this one was originally designed to have a sort of object in the middle, which the more you stand near, the more it pushes towards your enemy side of the camp, kind of like a bomb, I guess, something from Team Fortress or something. But just, it doesn't really seem symmetrical to me. But yeah, so if you see these and you think of a good idea or you want something to do, that's great. And we're interested in implementing them. They need some other fixes, but we can do those. It's just the mechanic ideas which we really sort of struggle with. So we'll post these all up on the forums, the little sort of, and this will be available in the VOD. So this one's called Castle Fragendorf. So this was replaced from the beta to release with Reichland Factory, but we can sort of bring it back. And it's sort of set around a big castle in the middle, with sort of keep in the middle, and one side of the river there's like a little village of some sort. And I think it was kind of designed as you have a few minutes to go into the castle and take the castle. I'm not sure whether it flipped sides, so order attacking it and then destruction attacking it, or what. It might kind of make more sense to do it as a sort of dungeon, because there's sort of the wings of the towers, because the towers are quite big and vertical, so it's a lot of fighting. I think this was in the beta that people could play, because we found some information about it in some old ancient sort of notes on a weird website. So yeah, this is the sort of the main keep here. It's quite a big room. And here we have
what?
Wrath of Heroes, the Pyramid of Cetra, which is great. So we had to write a sort of conversion layer to convert the files, but we've got them running in Warhammer. This is actually taken from our level editor because I didn't want to load them up into the game because that would take too long.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna need this one stat.
Yeah, but it's sort of, they're based around 3. So I mean, maybe we could do something with rotating spawn points or something. But I think that would be really cool to release, at least with Land of the Dead. And then there's Garden of Moor, which was kind of taken out from the Blood Hunt expansion pack that sort of Warhammer ended up scrapping. So there's the assets I imagine they would have used. Ignore the blue water, it's just our level editor. But you can kind of see how it would have worked, which is quite interesting. And it would be cool to bring back. And then next we have...
Ooh.
The arena. So this is kind of the arena I see, but it's sort of kind of like a More of Madness kind of thing, I imagine. So it's a bit smaller, maybe 6v6 games or something. Maybe it could be a good ranked match, but we could remove all the different blue, green, and things. And then we have this unnamed elf scenario, which was never fully built in the client, but we can kind of load it up and we could probably get it in. it seems to be some sort of elf land, because you can see the terrain sort of changes between dark elf and high elf sort of terrain. And we'll post this up on the forums to see if anyone can come up with ideas for these. So we are looking at putting in new scenarios. So yeah, if we're going to post them up, get some ideas, and there are still some others that we haven't implemented yet, like Grooveward Caverns, which we used for the Ragnarok event. But we will come back to those at some point as well.
Awesome, wonderful. That was actually pretty awesome. There are definitely a handful. I want to go into Cetra's house. That sounds super fun. All right, so that is the end of the long answer format questions. So the remaining questions that we're going to be doing pretty much are going to revolve around pretty rapid fire. So we're going to try and keep the responses as short as possible. A lot of these will just be yes/no question or yes/no answers, just kind of in the interest of getting these community questions answered, but also getting through them in a very timely fashion. So we're going to start with Liana. So first question, are there plans to introduce new gear sets?
Yes, sure. With the release of new dungeons like Lost Valley, for example.
Great. Second question, are there any plans to remove armor potions and armor talismans from the game?
Well, no such plans.
Third question, puzzles offer players new content to an extent. Will the lair boss puzzles, as they were on live, be re-implemented on Return of Reckoning?
Yes, but this takes a lot of manual scripting to implement many of the puzzle functions that I personally love. But we do have the ability and intention to do so, but not a priority for now.
Great. On to War Grimnir. Is there an interest in giving solo roamers a renown buff?
Can we give them a buff when they join a party instead?
There you go. Next question. Will the shield requirement ever be removed from the oppression tree for Chosen?
This is unlikely, but we do read detailed suggestions posted in the balance forum if there's anything regarding it. Secrets has a note here that he just deleted. But he put it back. Hold on. He says, I think Max described it well with the one example we had in private. This example was Bright Wizard slinging ice-based spells. If the Realm Champions want to modify or create an ability for Bright Wizard and they think it's a good fit for balance, they should at least make an attempt to make it lore-friendly or fit the identity of the class.
Cool beans.
So those things need to be lore-friendly and fit the identity of the class. Oppression is a defensive-based skill, a defensive-based tree for Chosen. It's defensive.
Great. I do love lore-friendly things. Not that,
Me too.
There's anything about me that would give that away. Next question. Do you agree that every class should have an end game, for specifically cities, viable spec?
I do agree that some classes are more viable than others.
Okay, next one. Is there a sorceress class buff scheduled for the balance team?
No.
Next up, are there plans to introduce a rampage-like buff that allows casters to ignore all disrupts and blocks for a short period of time?
That sounds awesome, but also no.
Do you plan on having more order classes suitable for large-scale battles?
Some classes are more suitable than others.
Okay. Will the old Harbinger ability be brought back for the Zealot?
No.
Next one. Will movement speed reduction abilities trigger an immunity like other crowd control does?
I don't know where this one comes from. I feel like this isn't a thing in most games. So no.
Fair enough. Okay. You can sit back down, good sir. Thank you very much. Max, are royal weapons coming soon?
I wouldn't say soon, because I don't want to give a date. But when we have new content, we'll most likely release them. So we want to create content for gear for people to sort of catch up with, and then it would be something we sort of look to releasing after that.
Great. Is it possible to make more parts of gear, particularly, say, main weapons and offhand weapons, able to be affected by dyes?
So weapons work differently than other pieces of armor. Additionally, we need artists to go through every weapon texture and set the dyeable areas. So it's possible, maybe, but immediately likely to happen, no.
Okay, great. Is there a possibility to introduce new types of siege weapons, such as ladders, towers, catapults, whatever?
We hope so. Siege towers and catapults are the ones we're eyeing up at the moment. Ladders, not so much, and etc. Maybe if we get more suggestions, we'll consider them.
Okay, great. So people get on that. Are there any plans to introduce a max camera distance view?
There's no plans, but if people think that a maximum camera distance would be better, then we would look into it. We'd sort of need to find a point where it sort of fits and would be good without revealing too much, if that makes sense.
Great. Are there any plans to look into the faction lockout mechanic, whether increasing or decreasing the timer or introducing new rules?
Yes, we would like to increase it. Ideally, we'd have better metrics on when to lock people out, but at the moment we don't, so...
Okay. Next one. Could major event items be account-bound rather than character-bound?
Not at the moment. It's a concept we have at least talked about. There is no support for it in the client, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. So it could be on the list in the future.
Okay. Could there be more mount varieties in the future as a PvP reward?
Yes. We are looking to adding more mounts. There are some in the game that were unanimated, and we're having some artists sort of model them and see what we can do with them.
Ooh, that's exciting. Are there plans to create and test new City Siege objectives that are different from the current ones?
In terms of city sieges, yes. And we were looking at the sort of extended cities and other mechanics to do, maybe replace some. And there were also the city public quests. They're in the safe cities that aren't implemented completely yet. So yeah.
Okay, great. Dalen, on to you, my good sir. Are there any plans to rework or change how battlefield objectives impact the RVR lake?
Not any immediate plans. I mean, we've discussed some bigger changes to RVR in general, but that's pretty loose plans, really, at this point.
Okay. Is there a plan to have a guild vault log in the future?
So it's a little bit tricky because the guild log is kind of hard-coded in the client. We might be able to expand that. Otherwise, we could maybe implement it with like a dot command that you know just lists them in chat. But maybe.
Okay. Any intentions on making a PvE mirror for those who want it for city sieges?
No. Not really, no.
Okay. Any plans to change how guard works for two-handed tanks?
No immediate plans, no.
Okay. Next question. Will there be a 2-2-2 requirement, so 2 tank, 2 DPS, 2 healer, for normal scenarios, similar to the requirement for ranked scenarios?
We might try it out sometime. Last time we tried enforcing more balanced pug scenarios and so on, there was actually a lot of complaints about the queue time for DPS players being super long. So we could try it out, but there's big risk the queue times for DPS players will be really long.
Okay. And then our last question here. Some crowd control abilities are not properly triggering immunities. Can this be adjusted or resolved?
I mean, I've seen this bug happens once in a while myself, but it's very difficult to reproduce the bug and test fixes for it. I've actually done some tweaks to try and fix it that I've just kind of silently added into the server. So maybe it's fixed, but there's no reliable way to kind of reproduce it. So I don't know if it's fixed or not. But hopefully, if we find a bug, we'll definitely fix it.
Okay, great. And then that's it for the rapid fire questions. So we are now on to the very last question, which is for Max. What are y'all's hopes and objectives regarding the future of the Return of Reckoning server?
So this question, when we first saw it, we all wrote sort of like sort of meme answers to it. Someone wrote survive. I wrote please Games Workshop take over. But then we filled it in properly. So I mean, I kind of separated by objectives and hopes. I mean, the objectives would be to get Hunter's Veil out, get the secret content we're working on finished and released, get the pathfinding finalized. I don't know if everyone knows, we've said we've been adding it in. It's currently removed because there's a 1 in a million chance that it crashes the server, and we're in talks with the people who build the library that we're using to try and fix that. Get Lost Veil out, get Tomb of the Vulture Lord, Land of the Dead done, build the tools to get the new animations into the game. We've been working on tools to load the skeletons, load the animations, which helps us build new mounts because we can see how how they're meant to move and things, so we can make sure they don't bug out, and it saves a lot of time. And develop on the City Siege system, which I talked about earlier. And then onto hopes. These can be anything, so it's kind of a good that someone mentioned this. I mean, I hope that someone manages to find the Blood Hunt expansion pack and just release it to us. That would be great. I actually threw in a screenshot of something Blood Hunt that made it into the client. It's probably not the final version they have, and it's probably something that slipped at some point. Which is just a sort of, looks like it could be a sort of dungeon. You've got like a room that could be like a tower of vampire counts. It's untextured. You can see the NPC at the bottom for scale, and then there's some concept art they did. So they actually had some stuff, and it was in the works. Some of it made it through into the live game, hidden in files. They could have been way more done, but I mean, we don't know. Another hope, we get loads of talented modelers to help us build new buildings, mounts, and stuff. And then we managed to get, maybe EA or Games Workshop decided to give us the tools to make new zones, races, careers, NPCs, and it would save us a ton of time and give us time to create great stuff for you guys.
So real quick, I'm going to add a quick question onto here, which is, if there are any people out there who are maybe inspired or interested, they play the game, they fall in love with it, and they have either the tools, whether it comes to art or animation or coding or whatever, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you guys and apply to have the ability to join up with the team?
Yeah, so if people want to join up the team, we have an application section on the forum, which we can only see. We had a problem where people didn't want to post their personal information, things like that. So it's a sort of private forum section where you can only see your own posts, apart from us, who can then read them, obviously. So if you go onto the application section of the forum, we've got different sections. So if you're interested in anything, or if you think you can provide help for the team, just post in there. Or if you want to ask some questions, just message one of us on Discord. Yeah.
Wonderful. And that is it. Thank y'all first for joining me. I really appreciate y'all taking the times out of your busy schedules to come hang out with me, and I also appreciate y'all allowing me to host this Q&A session. And thanks to the community.
Thank you for coming out to host. I appreciate you being here for us.
Oh, anytime. I love you guys. So, of course, thanks to the community for asking all the questions. Of course, we did get a ton of questions, but there were a fair number of duplicates and such. And I think we actually got through this one faster than the last one. Notably faster, actually, despite having way more questions. So that's great, and bodes well potentially for the future. So thank you all again so much for joining me. Before I hop out of here, kind of going down the order of y'all's names listed, so starting with Max and then to Liana, Wargrimner, Daylor, GameSpawn. If y'all have any closing statements or thoughts for the community or about that you'd like to throw out real quick, feel free.
I love you.
Okay, one at a time.
We're
one
a
at a
small
time.
team, but we really appreciate that everybody is out here.
Really a small team, and whatever else is on Zarbix's bingo card right now.
Very small team.
I almost sense like there's a repeating theme, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Thank you guys. Thank you guys again so much. I'm going to go ahead and hop out of this Discord chat and kind of do some closing thoughts here with the community. And I'll see you guys when I see you. Thanks so much for coming by.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, chat. That's going to be the end of our Q&A session with the developers from Return of Reckoning. That was a ton of fun. I hope you guys had a blast. There was a lot of really valuable information in there. There are a lot of things I'm really, really excited about. There are a lot of things that I know I'm going to be personally bugging them about in the very near future and afterwards. I really appreciate you all coming by. If you're not familiar with me, I am Lore Master of Sotek. I'm kind of one of the major figures in the Warhammer Fantasy community, particularly when it comes to the lore of Warhammer Fantasy, but I, as you can tell, dip my fingers and toes into a lot of the various communities revolving around the Warhammer Fantasy IP, including Return of Reckoning. Which, if you've never heard of the game, I would highly encourage you to just Google Return of Reckoning, or if you are a member of my community, you can type in !ROR or !Discord, go join our Discord. You can even join our ROR guild. So, this is been a lot of fun. I always love talking about the Warhammer Fantasy MMORPG. It's a wonderful game, and the fact that the devs do all of this that was like any interview I've had with any developer of mainstream video games where there's lots of money and support involved, and these guys do it for free out of the passion of their hearts, which is just crazy. In any event, for anyone that missed any of the questions or missed any of the anyone that missed anything, there will be a full recording, a full VOD, so to speak, on my YouTube channel, which is, you can literally just type in www.youtube.com/loremasterofsotech, and you will find it big on there. It'll also be available on Twitch for a while, and we will work on getting a... oh, we got one more thing from the Des. One more thing. I hear I got one more thing. Hello?
Yeah, Max has.
In the Discord channel.
Oh, in the Discord channel. Wait, one more thing for me or one more thing for the stream?
If you're still on stream, show that. It's kind of cool.
Where am I looking? Oh, there we go. What is this?
This was the sort of first ever custom thing we put in, and it was a yellow car for me. So it's a new mount that we're putting in.
There you go, chat. Your dwarf engineering has really reached a new height very suddenly. All right, thanks for that, guys. All right, chat. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys.